Hi, so I'd like to talk to you today about hybrid with equity. I'm Nick Bloom from Stanford. And before I start, I should probably explain where I'm coming from. My background on working from home. So I've actually been working on working from home for almost 20 years, kind of weirdly. I started, a lot in the early 2000s, but since the pandemic began, I've been surveying around 5,000 Americans a month and around 1,000 firms, and also been talking to hundreds and hundreds of organizations. So I'm going to bring all this experience and try and pack it into the next 15 minutes to give you some key learnings. So let's set the stage by saying, where are we right now? So this is a graph of the number of full paid days worked from home. And I'm going to focus on full paid days because these are days that matter for commuting and for office space. And what you can see is before the pandemic, pre-COVID, only about 5% of full paid days were work from home. So it's pretty rare. Most people did not work from home, and certainly very few people work from home full time. Along comes the pandemic, and this explodes in numbers up to about 50% or higher right at the beginning. And the way to think about this is roughly half of Americans have been working from home full time throughout the pandemic. So probably most of the people listening, so professionals, managers, people that work in offices primarily have been working full-time from home throughout the pandemic. The other half of Americans have not, and they tend to be lower earning. They're like frontline retail, frontline manufacturing, a lot of essential services, actually very important employees, public sector, teaching, hospitals, etc. So that explains where we are now. The big question everyone's after is what's going to happen post-pandemic? What does the future hold? And I have this from three different directions. They all tell you the same thing. So I feel very confident about saying this. So we've surveyed, as I said, thousands of people each month and asked them what their employers have told them. We've directly surveyed firms and asked them what they're going to do. And I've talked to hundreds of companies and asked them about their plans. They all say pretty much the same thing, which is post-pandemic is going to be hybrid. So most companies are saying, look, obviously for the employees that cannot work from home, that's roughly half, they're going to remain coming in every day. The other half, they're going to go from 5 days at home to typically 3 days in the office, 2 at home, or 2, 3, some version of hybrid. And why is that? Well, hybrid turns out to be basically the best of both worlds. It's kind of 90% of the benefits of fully in person and kind of 90% or maybe 90% of the benefits of working from home. And why is that? Well, most firms are saying, look, in a 3-2 or 2-3 plan, what we're going to do is we're going to have, let's say Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, you're going to come into the office. They're going to have all the meetings, events, large meetings, client events, trainings, leaving things, lunches, coffees are going to be on those 3 days. So they're going to be like exhaustively social days. Whenever you want to meet anyone in person, you arrange at one of those 3 days. On the other days, let's say Wednesday, Friday, we're all going to work from home. And that's going to be the quiet time we're reading, writing reports, preparing presentations, etc. And that means you kind of get the benefit of the office, which is being there in person, which is good for creativity and good for building culture. And then on your 2 or 3 days a week at home, you get the benefits of working from home, which is it's quiet, which if you're doing quiet work is the best place to be. You're more productive per minute. And secondly, you save on commute. So the average American or the average Northern European commutes about an hour a day, half an hour each way. And we know from detailed survey data that when people don't commute because they work from home, about half of the time saved, they work on their primary job and half of the time they take off as leisure. So as an employer, if you let people work from home, each day you do that, they probably work about 30 minutes more for you and they probably get 30 more minutes more leisure. So that's clearly kind of a win-win situation. So as a result, hybrid has become the dominant form for companies. Just about every firm, literally every firm I'm talking to, I must have talked to hundreds of them now, are doing hybrid. There are a few that are doing fully remote, and there are none that I'm aware of that have successfully pulled their employees back 5 days a week to the office. So here's Citigroup, hybrid, here's HSB, hybrid, here's Google, hybrid. I could go on and on. This hybrid bandwagon has really taken off in the last few months because of figures like this. So this chart shows the response to the question, if my employer announced that all employees must return to the work site 5+ days a week in month after next, I would. And you notice that 57% of people comply and return. So these, if you're a firm, these are the good numbers. these are the folks that are going to come back and work in the office 5 days a week. The problem is the rest, the other 40%, you notice that 37% of them are going to return, but they'll be actively looking for another job. These are hardly the best employers. They basically come back, but grudgingly so, and are actively looking to move. And then even worse maybe is the remaining 6.6% or 7% that are basically just going to quit before they even come back. So this reflects the strength of the current labor market. The US and European labor markets are becoming extremely hot. It's very hard to hire, particularly high talented people. And if you try and have employees back in the office 5 days a week, you're just going to see mass quitting. As a result, almost nobody's doing that. So given we're a hybrid, the questions that I face all the time and I discuss with firms is how to run this. So in particular, one, which days people should work from home, and two, how many days they should work from home. And this is much more of a battleground. Why don't I go through this? So firstly, another data point, what employees want shows enormous variation. So we've asked this question to almost 50,000 people over several waves in multiple countries. This is US data. It looks very similar. I've seen it across Europe. We asked people in 2022 plus after COVID, how often would you like to have paid work days at home? Now, you can see that there are 23% that say never. They tend to be young singles or older empty nesters. They're like, I never want to have another day worked from home. It's really depressing and isolating and boring, and I want to go back full time. Then at the other extreme, there are 32% of people that say, I never want to go back to the office again. They love working from home. They tend to be, typically middle-aged, young kids living in a house kind of further from the office. And they're very happy working from home full time. And then the remaining half of people are somewhere in the middle. So that would be, for example, I would be there. I like my colleagues a lot. I like going in, but I'm happy working at home a couple of days a week. It saves hassle, saves the commute, it's quiet. So we have this huge spread, and you could easily say, as managers certainly early in the pandemic were saying to me, why not let people choose? It's a free country. Why not let employees choose what they do? I've been highlighting some of the risks of choice, and I'm just going to go through a couple of them right now. And I'm not against full choice, but there are some risks that come with it. So one concern is over diversity and the impact on DEI. So to see this, note a couple of facts. First is who wants to work from home is not random. So on the left, I'm showing you data from roughly 30,000 responses over the last few months. On the top left, if we look at respondees that are graduates, so have a university degree, and they have children under the age of 12, within that cell, in the data, women report a significantly higher preference to work from home than men. And in fact, in general, people with young kids want to work from home more than without, but within that subset, particularly women want to work even higher relative to men. Down below, we break it down by race, and you can see that Black and Asian workers report in our data a significantly higher preference than white. If you look at disability, you see disabled workers have a significantly higher preference to work from home. People living far from the office that often are lower income in big cities have a higher preference. A number of things that I think are totally understandable, make economic and sociological sense, but are important facts to be aware of. The issue is this runs into this, which is if you are working from home and you're competing for a promotion with folks that are coming to the office, let's say 4 or 5 days a week, you're at a significant disadvantage. So in this study here, which is an older randomized control trial around a more recent survey during the pandemic, we see working from home can cut your rate of promotion by up to 50%. So you can see the issue. If you let people choose days and you have a kind of total free-for-all, there's risk that certain groups could come in, they move up, they get promoted, and you have a diversity crisis within the firm. So this is one reason I think this process needs to be managed, and particularly managed so that people that want to work from home 2 days a week have the ability to do that without feeling that somehow they're getting left behind. Other people are coming in. The other issue is just space, a much more practical issue that we asked this question. If you got to work from home for 2 days per week, which 2 days would you choose? You can guess. This is not very surprising data. 64% of people said Friday, 56% of people said Monday. So you can kind of flip this 2 ways. You can either say, look, I want to keep my current office space, but I actually want to have a bit lower density. I don't want people, so crushed up against each other, which this is going to be a problem if you have complete choice. Or you can say, actually, I'd like to cut my office space to reduce my costs. Either way, you can see that full choice is, going to be a bit tricky if you want to efficiently use space. So what are most firms doing? Most firms in our firm survey report, well, at first I point out, this green thing here is full decentralized. It's like everyone you choose, which days, and how many days you come in. Very few large firms are doing that. Mostly they're either letting it be divided or decided team by team or division by division. Say corporate, you guys decide, residential, you guys decide, or they're having a company-wide plan. For example, I was talking to Lazard's, an investment bank. They mentioned that they're going to have people come in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, work from home Monday, Friday. Another issue around hybrid equity is, as I mentioned earlier, not everyone can work from home. In fact, around half of American employees cannot work from home. And the same is true in Northern Europe. They do jobs that are manufacturing, frontline retail, healthcare, et cetera. The issue is, they might want to work from home, and indeed they do. So this is a graph here of the share of post-COVID days work from home. The black circles is what people want, broken up by their income level, and the red triangles is what they're going to get. What you can see is people by all levels of income, on average, want to work from home about 2 to 2.5 days a week. So from low to medium to high paid employees across America all basically want, on average, the same thing. They kind of want 3-2 or 2-3 plan. The issue is the red triangles. If you ask them what they've been told they're going to get by their employer, you notice that low-income people have been told they're going to get less than 1 day a week on average, whereas folks at the top end basically get what they want. And the reason this is a problem is hybrid working from home is actually pretty valuable. In our surveys, it turns out people report that it's equivalent to about a 6 to 8% pay increase. So giving people the ability to work from home 2 days a week is a very important and valuable perk. And it's a great thing to do, but it's worth noting that around half of typical firms are not going to get that and feel some resentment. And in fact, many managers I've spoken to have highlighted this and said, a hybrid plan's great, but I have a group of employees that are feeling really angry, really upset. They're not getting it. They've had to work throughout the pandemic. Post-pandemic, they have to come in, they don't get this perk. So I'll talk a bit about this towards the end, but one of the things is to try and think about how to give more flexibility to lower income or, frontline employees that have to come in. For example, think about 980 work schemes or 4-day working weeks, whereby say they get the option to work 4 days a week for 10 hours rather than say 5 or 8. This isn't a perfect substitute, but it's worth thinking about. Finally, I'm going to end on the point which I call kind of the Marissa Mayer point. So Marissa Mayer was the CEO of Yahoo from 2012 to 2017. She had a successful run. It's been very successful since. And, oddly enough, her biggest hit in the media was for something that happened in 2013 when she banned working from home, at least temporarily in Yahoo. And I think what Marissa did was absolutely right, and I'll explain why, but she was kind of 10 years ahead of her time, and it's worth explaining this because it's a very useful lesson for managing businesses now. So I spoke to Marissa about a year ago, and she said, look, employees can be managed in a couple of ways. You can think about this. You can think about employees can be managed, say, on inputs. So this is a screenshot of some slides from a former student of mine that worked in a big bank. And she said, look, when I evaluate and manage people, I do it based on numbers. I don't want favoritism. I don't want connections or any kind of bias. I want to do it based on their performance, their numbers, their ability. So she said, I'm very numerate. I have very strict and time-consuming but effective performance review systems, and I promote people based on this. And this is great. The issue is if you don't have that, if you don't have good performance management systems, you generally, when people are in the office, do management based on input. So what you see people do. So in person, that basically means you're watching folks in the office. Are they on the keyboard at their desk, seem to be working hard, running around, talking to people? Do they basically look like active, hardworking employees? The problem is when they're working from home, you can't see them. So what do you do? Well, either if you use input management, you kind of can't manage them, which is pretty problematic, or possibly even worse, you fall back on this kind of surveillance software. So here's a photo from this really spooky surveillance software, which is some companies have installed it, whereby you take screenshots of what people are doing, you look at their screens, you use their webcams, etc. And this is a pretty problematic fallback for firms that use input-based management. So the lesson for this is working from home is incredibly complementary with good performance management systems. And in fact, it makes a lot of sense to beef up investment in data, how to track employees in a kind of, not surveillance, but in terms of what they achieve, their numbers, have a lot of 360 review meetings, have proper performance appraisals. And in fact, we see in the data that firms that had better management practices, performance review practices, did much better during the pandemic and had more working from home. This is UK data, this is actually Japanese data, Italian data, and data from the World Bank. So I'll end on one kind of a quirky fact that I've found that might be useful, which is on the personal side. It turns out the handshake is much less welcome than it used to be. So we asked people what their standard form of greetings were in a business context. And pre-pandemic, most people said the handshake. Post-pandemic, you can notice for men and particularly for women, non-touch verbal greeting seems to be what's preferred. And so, another piece of advice is, unless you're certain of what whoever you're meeting wants, I would probably, to be safe, start with or go with verbal greeting. So to summarize my thoughts on key management decisions, firstly, form. Almost everyone I speak to is going to hybrid 3-2, 2-3. You might want another day in the office for the first year for new hires. Choice, most people are allowing decisions at the team or affinity level. They're trying to also achieve equity in the number of days, which means they're saying, look, we're going to have, let's say, 2 days in the office for sure, Monday, Wednesday. We're also going to make sure everyone works at home on, let's say, Tuesday, Friday, and Wednesday is a choice day. So importantly, manage both days in the office and days at home to make sure there's equity and we don't have diversity issues. Third, inequality, allow greater flexibility for non-working from home employees. So things like 980 and 4-day weeks. HR performance management is critical. And finally, just to state the obvious, but this thing is just changing all the time. And I would be very much focused on both messaging for employees. This is a continuously evolving system. Whatever I set up now may change in spring or summer next year. And B, continue to think about it, collect data, analyze, learn from other firms, particularly, copy good practices from other firms and try and learn from other firms that make mistakes. So, I'll end and say I have more research. I have a research page on my homepage if anyone's interested. Thank you very much for listening.